one-timer. Score! Oh, it's over. It's over. They score!
That's game. Oh, my goodness.
They score. Roll the highlight reel. What a ripper. Top Jetta. Spread it on.
It's HNLive Today. I'm Shawn Mullin, joined once again by our friend Dave Dawson, the voice of the Edmonton Oil Kings. We're going to talk a little bit of junior hockey, Western Hockey League, the road to the Centennial Cup in junior A hockey, the Heritage Junior Hockey League and Capital Junior Hockey League playoffs, which you're getting to see on HNLive.ca. And we have a major announcement for you, some unfinished business on HNLive.ca. We're going to tell you all about.
And the announcement might be the best there is, maybe the best there was, and the best there ever will be, potentially.
It's all brought to you by Adrenaline Source for Sports, Calgary's premier store for hockey, lacrosse, and team apparel. Recently renovated and bigger and better than ever. A one-stop shop for all your sporting goods needs. Visit us online at adrenalinegroup.ca. We fit your game. And Dave, we're going to get into junior A hockey, the Centennial Cup. We're going to talk about the junior B playoffs, especially in the Heritage League and the Capital Junior Hockey League, leading all up to the Junior B Provincials we'll have on HNLive.ca. But you are the voice right now of one of the hottest teams all of a sudden in the Western Hockey League. The Edmonton Oil Kings couldn't win a game at the beginning of your run broadcasting with them here in the second half of the year. And all of a sudden, they're rolling back-to-back wins against Red Deer, taking Medicine Hat toe-to-toe in an absolute battle, 9-7, and a big win over Wenatchee. How much fun is it to watch the Oil Kings play hockey right now?
Yeah, it's a lot more fun now than it was in the first week of the road trip. That was for sure. My first game that I broadcast was an 8-1 loss to the Calgary Hitmen, a team that has had their way with them all season long, and that wasn't a lot of fun. And there were some components of they played well throughout the Eastern Canada road trip, but they just got back home, a couple of wins against Red Deer, and then the game against Medicine Hat, if not for about 9 or 10 minutes in the second period, where Gavin McKenna literally took over. Then, they turned into a pretty good hockey game. 15,000 people, hockey hooky day. They're down 4-3, 30 seconds left. They pull the goalie, 2 goals in 20 seconds, 9 seconds left, the game winner. They beat Lethbridge on Friday night and got to hang out with Corey Bro, the owner of HNLive, for a little bit there as well. And that was an incredible game, a 2-1 win. And then they come back and beat the formerly Winnipeg, formerly Kootenay Ice, Wenatchee Wild on home ice. And things are getting wild. There's still very much belief in the Oil Kings. They can make the playoffs. Mathematically, it's going to take some quotients and some long division potentially to make it work. But it's fun. It's been fun to be able to call games at Rogers Place from crowds in between 8 and 15,000 people.
Yeah, no doubt about it. You mentioned Gavin McKenna, though. I mean, we saw him broadcasting as Hockey Canada's broadcast partner, streaming partner for the World Under-17 Hockey Challenge. I mean, it's amazing how we can watch these players at the U15 level and jump right into the Western Hockey League, and a player like McKenna, a player like Brechny, they're already among the best players in the entire league. They're already guys taking over games. And it's extraordinary how much talent they have at such a young age.
And let's not forget Cameron Schmidt getting a hat trick the other day. He came into the Rocky Mountain Classic 2 years ago, and I think he scored 3 shorthanded goals in one game. It was unbelievable, and that's what's great.
The winner as well, the gold medal game at the World Under-17 Hockey Challenge. So,
yeah, and then you have your Cole Reshny, then you have Reese Hamilton, and the list goes on. That you and I have been able to experience some of these elite level players on their journey to the pros, and that's really what HNLive is about. Is the opportunity to see some of these kids on their way and on their path, right at the U15 level when they're draft eligible. Landon DuPont, we've been able to see some of his pretty big games. So that's what's been special for me. And then now seeing them in the Western League and seeing guys come in, I got to see Luke Powell score his first Western Hockey League goal, member of NAX, right? Jack Toogood is right there to congratulate him. Who was Jack Toogood? Well, he played with Cole Rechny and Reese Hamilton and Hayden Harsani. Hayden Harsani plays with Gavin McKenna, right? All these NAX players and guys that, we've seen consistently appear in Edge School players. We've seen it consistently appear on HNLive broadcast now in the Western Hockey League, doing well. So forget the Oil Kings and the Medicine Hat Tigers. How about the Swift Current Broncos these days, right? So, yeah, the Oil Kings are one of the hottest teams in the Western League, but the hottest team in the Dub right now are the Swift Current Broncos.
Well, and everything's coming together for them. And I actually had a chance to briefly catch up with their general manager, Chad Leslie, on the weekend when I was in Medicine Hat. Took my daughter to watch the Broncos play the Tigers on Saturday, and that was a great game, back and forth. Two excellent teams, an overtime win in that one for the Broncos. They have a blue line that averages over 6'3" tall. I mean, size isn't everything in the sport these days. I know it's evolved, but if you have that kind of size and mobility and experience on your blue line heading towards the playoffs, boy, does that mean a lot. You know, they got Galloway back in the lineup here recently. He used to play as the captain of the Calgary Hitmen and had some injury issues after the trade deadline. Their blue line is now healthy and just excellent. Reed Dick, Boston Bruins draft pick, is playing tremendous hockey in goal for them. Connor Geekie, of course, has made a huge difference coming over, and he's one of the best players in the Western Hockey League, period. But they've got a roster full of very talented, some drafted players as well mixed in. Connor Vitson drafted by Anaheim, Josh Philman by the New Jersey Devils, Owen Pickering by the Pittsburgh Penguins, just to name a few of them. It's a very talented team that dealt with injuries all year long, dealt with some controversy with their head coach, who ended up being let go. They had a lot of hurdles they had to battle through. Then they made some moves at the deadline and got healthy. And now I think they're as good as any team you'll see in the Eastern Conference. And only 3 points back of the Medicine Hat Tigers to win the Central Division, which would really set them up well in the playoffs. That'll be a race to watch down the stretch. But at the same time, while those Tigers games loom, you have to be very aware that even those teams that may, in the standings, look like teams you should get wins against, there's 2 games coming up against Edmonton. One this weekend in Edmonton and one on Wednesday back in Swift Current right here. And those are games the Broncos are going to have to take very seriously, because when you and I called that game together in Swift Current, that came right down to the wire. Edmonton battled them hard, and the Oil Kings have played great hockey as of late. So,
and they've been battling just a pile of injuries. Skylar Bruce, one of their 20-year-olds, is now down. They've had Ishmael Abagosh, one of their really physical defensemen, who's on a 3-game suspension. They got John Sabo, reliable faceoff guy. He's been down. At times they battled a plethora of injuries this year. Gavin Hodnett's playing some of the best hockey he's played in his career. Grayson Sauchin, since coming over from Seattle, he's been a stalwart. Adam Yeko scored a highlight reel goal on Friday night in Lethbridge. And, defensively, Blake Fiddler, a guy that you saw at the World Under 17. When he's eligible next year, there's going to be some eyes around him, because he's been, just unbelievable. Ty Nash, 20-year-old as well, playing against 2 of his former teams on the weekend, Wenatchee, formerly Winnipeg, and Lethbridge. So it's interesting. And Mully, you mentioned that. Let's look around the league. The Brandon Wheat Kings beat Saskatoon in Saskatoon,
right.
Eastern Conference. There's no easy games.
No, there isn't. And we're seeing that all around the league, really. But that's exactly it. So, no matter who you line up with in the first round, even if you're in the second seed, if you're the Broncos, or if you're the first seed, if you're the Blades, it's going to be a battle. It's going to be a lot of fun. But certainly, watching 2 of the hotter teams in the league collide this week is going to be a lot of fun for you and your job, with Swift Current coming and Red Deer again on the weekend. So 2 very heated games for you coming up, Dave, and I think will be a lot of fun for you to watch. And the Oil Kings are proving why a lot of people think that they're a team that's going to make a huge leap next season.
Yeah, 3 big games this week. Hockey Day in Calgary on Wednesday, and then Medicine Hat Friday, back home to Swift Current on Saturday, then back to see you in Swift Current on Wednesday. I'd like to get you in the booth. I'm not sure if it'll work out this time around based on everything that you're juggling, but it was great to have you in the booth when we got to see each other. And at the very least, I get to see you here, HNLive supermodel Shawn Mullin, and that's all that matters to me.
Stay with us. Again, we have a major announcement coming up on the program we're really excited about. We also want to talk, as we continue to talk junior hockey, the Centennial Cup is set for May, and it's going to be a new national champion this year with the changes going on in Junior A, which makes it such an interesting, wide-open field. And some movement in the CJHL rankings here this week, Dave, with the Collingwood Blues jumping ahead of the Flin Flon Bombers in top spot.
And the Collingwood Blues are a team that I was pretty public about, earmarked them towards the start of the year, that don't sleep on the Collingwood Blues. Noah Pack last year literally stole games at the Centennial Cup for the Blues. The organization, I got to meet their ownership group, their coaching staff, the way that they put the entire team together, the roster, the way they're coached. I loved everything about the Collingwood Blues organization. And then when I got to see them play, I kind of silently cheered for them all week long. And oops, not so silent anymore. So, but I love Noah Pack as a goaltender. I think he's phenomenal. They've now jumped up into top spot. Flynn Flon has fallen down a couple. But yeah, it's going to be crazy. Interesting to see. And Shawn, you're going to be there at the Centennial Cup. And it's a wide open field. And I think that's what's exciting about this. The ability to be a national champion, there's something so special about that, but having that tag. If you're the one at the top of the ladder, you're the one at the top of the chain, you're going to get your game, on a national stage, and you're set above the rest. And I think that's going to be incredible, and it's a wide open field.
Well, and you're seeing some teams that are, showing in the last few years to be consistently well-built franchises. Collingwood's one. Steinbach, they're always near the top of the Manitoba Junior Hockey League. Flin Flon's always near the top of the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League. Winkler, Trenton. These are teams, these are franchises that just do things the right way. And they're near the top of that ranking list for a reason. But it's going to be so much fun to watch how things progress towards the playoffs and who ends up emerging from those leagues to be a part of the Centennial Cup. Now, speaking about how playoffs, you never know what to expect. In the Heritage Junior Hockey League, Chris Colwell was on the program last week, Dave, and we discussed the High River Flyers, who were on the edge of being eliminated, had to go on the run of a lifetime just to make it into the Heritage Junior Hockey League playoffs. Then they beat the Cochrane Generals in the first round play-in series. And we said on the program last week, if you're Okotoks, even though they're the top-ranked team in the Heritage League going into playoffs, you don't want to play High River because they've been playing do-or-death hockey for a month, and they're the hottest team in the league. So High River gets into that series with Okotoks, and what do? They go and win Game 1, 4-1. Again, that anything can happen in playoff mentality at play here.
Yeah, we've absolutely loved covering the Heritage Junior Hockey League for the last couple of years. It's been just a phenomenal experience to take part. And I remember calling one of the High River games earlier this season against the Rocky Rams. And again, we did Rocky Rams hockey as well on HNLive, as we did Cochrane Generals hockey and High River. It's great to see you have those Cinderella teams that peak at the right time. And it makes things interesting because I'll be honest with you, on the outside looking in, we as a broadcast crew, between you and myself and the professor, Chris Colwell, on the outside, we're kind of looking at the playoffs going, okay, so Sylvan Okotoks in the finals, so who wants to call it, right? So, but not the case, right? It's a wide open stage. You have, Sylvan and Airdrie getting underway, and those games will be coming up this week also on HNLive. That could be an open stage as well. It only makes things more exciting down the stretch. And the Heritage Junior Hockey League has always been, of the 5 Junior B leagues in Alberta, one of the more elite level leagues that is constantly producing provincial championships, provincial finalists, bronze medalist at the provincials. The Heritage League consistently has been doing that. So it makes it fun to watch. And, whether you're a consumer of Junior B hockey, I think playoff time in the Heritage is exciting.
In the other series, by the way, Medicine Hat, 2 overtime wins to start over Coaldale, lead that series 2-0. Airdrie and Sylvan Lake, well, the Sylvan Lake Wranglers are so tough for anyone this season so far. A 6-1 win for them in Game 1. Game 2 is going to be in Airdrie, and we'll see how that one goes, whether or not Airdrie can get back even on HNLive.ca. And it is Rocky leading Mountain View by a 2-0 series lead in the other series going on at the moment. Now in the Capital Junior Hockey League, where we cover the Sherwood Park Knights, the Knights are in a bit of a battle here. And, we knew it wasn't going to be easy. Despite being a 2-time defending champions, they've got a real war on their hands in their quarterfinal against the Fort Sask Hawks. It's a tied series, Dave, 1-1. After an 8-1 win in Game 1 for the Knights, the Hawks come back and win 6-3 in Game 2. That tells you, as good as Sherwood Park is, they're going to have to be at their best against the Hawks.
Well, I remember in my number of chats with Tyler Steele, their head coach this year, and a number of people involved in the organization, Rick Rashog, and even some of the players, that the Knights, as skilled as they are, sometimes have that propensity to drink a little bit of their own Kool-Aid after a victory. They'll go, okay, 8-1, okay, there's no chinks in this armor. And then the next day, bing, here comes, wow, we're down 2-0 early. Okay, what just happened here? So I think for Sherwood Park, if you're looking at it from a Sherwood Park perspective, a bit of a wake-up call and a good time to do that. A team that didn't lose a lot of games this year. One of the highest scoring teams. I believe they finished the highest scoring team in all of Alberta Junior B by the end of the regular season. It's also great competitive stuff for Fort Sask to say, hey, you know what? We're going to push it. And we're not going to lay down easy, because the Capital League semifinals and the finals last year with Beaumont and St. Albert, I went to all those games. They were an absolute treat to watch. They're not going to lay down, but I know for one thing for Sherwood Park Knights, if there's members of their program watching this, and you have done the games all year long, it's not pretty typical, but they're probably not surprised in losing the second game, that it's brand new series.
Absolutely, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Playoff time. There's nothing like playoff time, and we're real excited to cover the HJHL and the CJHL in playoff action on HNLive.ca, all the way to the Alberta Junior B Provincials, which we'll get to cover again on HNLive.ca this year. And the Junior B Provincials last year, Dave, were excellent, extraordinarily entertaining down to the final game. I'm sure it'll be just that way again this year.
Well, and I think this year for the Alberta Junior B Provincials, you look at a grander stage, this might be one of the more special provincials in history, because this obviously being our fourth year doing it. So our first one was in Wetaskiwin in 2019. Then we did in Wainwright, then Okotoks last year, and now in Peace River this year. Those of you who are educated on the Junior B scale, Peace River is where Darcy Hogan, the late Humboldt Broncos coach, coached for 12 years. There's a statue outside of the arena that's newly renovated, and that's a special time. I started my broadcast career in 2008 working for the Whitecourt Wolverines, then Junior B, had a lot of championship games and games in Peace River. I spent a lot of time getting to know Darcy Hogan and Christina and the family. So it's going to be really special for me, not only as just being able to do the Junior B Provincials and call games there, which is one of my favorite tournaments of the whole year, but it's going to be a really special time for us as a company. We've had Mike Fosty on every year because the anniversary of the Humboldt bus crash falls right in the middle of the Junior B Provincials. It's on April 6th. So it's always every year been a landmark. So now to have that anniversary in Peace River, where Darcy Hogan coached, this is probably the most special Junior B Provincials that we've ever had.
No doubt about it, then. Yeah, thanks for telling that story, Dave. And I'm sure that story will continue to get told as we get closer to those provincials. Now, switching gears entirely. It was just under a year ago at HN Live, we got the opportunity to broadcast a show that was very special to us. And for us, there's a little bit of unfinished business. So here's the announcement we've all been waiting for. Coming up in just a few weeks, Friday, March 29th, Dungeon Wrestling Unfinished Business 2, live from the Victoria Pavilion in Calgary, will be live on HNLive.ca. And we're so pleased to be joined by the voice, the play-by-play broadcaster for Dungeon Wrestling, Mike McGuire, also the host of the McGuire on Wrestling podcast and mornings on 98.1 The Ranch in Lethbridge. Mike, we're so pleased to have you on the show and so pleased to partner up with Dungeon Wrestling.
I'm ecstatic to be here. Thank you guys for the opportunity to talk about our show and what we're going to be bringing to HN Live and what you're going to help us bring to the world here. This won't be our first foray with HN Live, but the company has definitely grown quite a bit since our last time together. So excited to know what you guys want to know about the show and talk all about it.
Mike, Shawn and I have been wrestling consumers, much like yourself, since we were, children. And I think anybody who grew up watching wrestling has always has a piece of that in their heart. So as we've seen wrestling evolve over the years, what exactly can people expect? For those who haven't seen Dungeon Wrestling before, what can they expect from the brand?
It's pretty amazing because for those that have never seen Dungeon Wrestling before, I always say, have you seen Stampede Wrestling? And some people have seen clips here and there, like little pieces of Stampede throughout the decades. And we've all seen highlight reels through Hall of Fame nominations for guys like Bret Hart and others who came through the Calgary territory back in the day. But what you honestly get with Dungeon Wrestling is just hard-hitting, common sense, yay, boo, good guys, bad guys, pro wrestling at its finest. You get some of the best athletes from not just across Canada, not just across Alberta, but literally around the world come together to be a part of this thing. We've already had some of the biggest names out there. Our last champion before our current one just happens to be the general manager of WWE SmackDown now in Nick Aldis, the national treasure. There's other names that are vying for that championship too. Once Chris Masters, who's our current champion, won the title, he's been taking that thing around the world with him, defending it in different places. So the credibility of that title is getting up there, but now it's getting the attention of some people who know the legacy of Calgary Pro Wrestling, who know the legacy of heart-built pro wrestling, and you're getting wrestlers that really, really, really want to perform, and people like to throw the word compete around. I think it's compete for the attention and the top spot of wrestling fans.
Well, and I want to talk about that legacy, but you brought up Chris Masters, and here's a guy who's not only had the national recognition of being a star in the World Wrestling Entertainment, but at the same time, if you haven't seen him as a wrestling fan in the last 5 years, the evolution of his game, I mean, as he's gotten more experience in the game and he's gone around the world, this is a finely tuned pro wrestler who has taken his ability up to the next level, now one of the best in the world. I think he's leaps and bounds even above where he was in WWE.
Oh, and he'll tell you the same thing without trying to be, conceited about it. I had the chance to talk with him as he was on his way in the first time, and he was getting contention for that championship. We had him on the podcast, and I just said, exactly what you're saying, Shawn. The Chris Masters that you may have seen on TV, who was just a body guy, who just, he's big, has totally changed. His style has become very technical. He's become very ground-based, very finessed as well. There's some extra agility. He has leaned down physically. So as you guys know with hockey players or any other athletes, if you lean down, you trim down, you get into a better cardiovascular condition. That allows you to do all sorts of different things. He can go longer. He somehow, even though not being as big maybe as he was when he was a kid, seems stronger and is able to last longer. So, yeah, his performance really lends itself to what Dungeon Wrestling is all about, which again, I mean, we've got Bret Hart behind the scenes running the books, and he's trying to make sure the matches all make sense. And when Bret Hart gives you the nod and says, yeah, you're our guy, I mean, obviously Masters had to get in that spot, but to be there and say, okay, you know what, we're okay with this, then, I mean, that tells you what kind of a wrestler he's become.
Well, and talk about the matchup there with Steve Macklin, because these, again, when you look at pro wrestling these days, there's some people that think, okay, there's, WWE and there's whatever other big companies out there. It's probably the greatest state of independent wrestling there's been in generations. There's so much talent out there that isn't locked into one of those major national companies. And you have two of the best of them set to compete for the Stu Hart Championship on Friday, March 29th on HNLive.
And that's the amazing thing about it, I mean, Masters was a part of the NWA for a while there. Steve Macklin, a part of TNA Wrestling, and both great places to work if you want to be a wrestler and own your craft and get noticed around the world. It's a great way to do it. But when you're in those positions and you're wanting to come to Dungeon Wrestling, and I could laundry list a bunch of names who have said, we want to be there, who are in that category. Like you said, independent wrestling now has a litany of varieties for wrestlers to go and compete in different areas and territories or regions or whatever you want to call it. But there's something about Dungeon Wrestling. There's something about being in that Victoria Pavilion. You walk in, I don't care how old you are, when the first time you saw wrestling was, if it's the first time you're seeing it now, it transforms you. It takes you back to that time where you're just there for the excitement. You're there for the action. And that's not just the fans. That's the wrestlers themselves. So like you said, these upper echelon independent wrestling stars are really want to be a part of what we're doing in Dungeon Wrestling. And, without trying to be the guy that hypes the pay-per-view here, I mean, you never know what's going to happen or who might show up or who might make themselves known coming up on March 29th.
Mike, now, anybody watching this who doesn't consume wrestling lately, right? They might be more into UFC or they might be more into different sports here or there. You mentioned earlier that it has a lot of that yay, boo, the traditional style of wrestling. Yeah. And myself, who was a very WWE, WCW back in the day, right? When the two of them were rivals, and that was when wrestling, I think, was probably at its pinnacle in the world. What makes Dungeon Wrestling so special for the viewer who doesn't consume wrestling today? And I will advocate for. I watched your guys' initial pay-per-view last year, and I haven't watched wrestling in 10 years. I was blown away.
There is something about simplicity, and it's not just in wrestling that I could say this. I mean, we could talk about this with hockey. We could talk about this with baseball, football. Sometimes the classic stuff still works. You can have all the trick shots, you can have all the amazing moves and everything else, but sometimes just knowing what you're doing and doing it well enough to get the job done is all it takes. And that's kind of what the Calgary scene was always about. It wasn't about always being the flashiest. It was about going in there and convincing the fans that I'm going to fight for your side, or I don't like you, and getting the crowd involved in it. The other thing I got to say too about pro wrestling and MMA and everything else is that we all know that what we're watching is meant to be consumed by a mass audience. That's what pro wrestling always has been. That's why it's been on TV longer than any other medium. That's why it's been a backbone for digital pay-per-view and things like this. It's because it has such a broad appeal. So if you come to a wrestling match and just keep it simple for yourself coming in, you'd be amazed how many people who say, oh, I've never seen wrestling. That's whatever. That stuff's silly. They leave the shows and they're just blown away by the experiences they've had. I see it every show. I'll walk around because I do some of the ring announcing for the shows as well, and I'll talk to the fans beforehand, and you can spot the ones that have never been to a wrestling show before, and they're kind of laughing, like, yeah, look at this sort of thing. By the end of it, they're the ones leading the chants. They're the ones, throwing babies in the air and spilling their beer all over the place and everything else because they get that excited about it.
Yeah.
No, Mike, you grew up, obviously, we all grew up when watching wrestling, romanticizing the concept of being a ring announcer, right? Like we always, would do the Jim Ross and, whether it was slamming our dolls or stuffed animals down. I had that Ted DiBiase $1 million man doll that I would elbow drop. And you got the opportunity now to be the play-by-play guy, right? So, and you're good at it. What's that been like for you to step into as a niche, and how much are you enjoying that? And incorporating all those concepts, not only being a broadcaster, but also being that kid growing up, enjoying it. Now you get to be that guy.
Well, first of all, Dave, I'll forgive you for using the D word. It's action figure. But nevertheless.
I realized as soon as I said doll, I was like, oh, I'm going to get raked over the coals for that one.
No, it's fine. I mean, hey, tell Ted DiBiase that he had a doll,
I did actually when I interviewed him years ago. So
well, there you go. But when it comes down to it, honestly, when I was a kid growing up, I didn't want to be an announcer. I wanted to be Bret Hart's tag team partner. I wanted to win the tag team championships and go around the world. I did train. I did wrestle. I had an injury outside of wrestling that actually stopped me from being able to do that. And radio was always the other dream job. Being a broadcaster was. And I noticed as I would grow up watching those guys, like you mentioned, watching Jim Ross's, watching Tony Schiavone, going back and finding out about the guys like Gordon Soley, and even me and Gene Okerlund, who, the rare times that you would catch him doing commentary as opposed to just the backstage interviews, had his own style. And then you get into the guys of today, like guys like Michael Cole, Corey Graves. You flip over to AEW, Jim Ross is there now. It's crazy. Like the art of calling a match, the art of being involved, having the excitement there, but at the same time, trying to make sure you're making the wrestlers the focus. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not there to get Mike McGuire a profile and get him over to be like, hey, look how great I'm talking about these wrestlers. What it's all about, honestly, is getting involved in the match. And I think the only way you can do that is by remaining a fan. I don't think you can do this and not be a fan of wrestling. And that's something that for the longest time, as my broadcasting career would go, sometimes bosses be like, the wrestling stuff, do you really got to talk about that so much? And it wasn't until just a few years ago when I started this thing with Dungeon Wrestling, I realized I've been living a lie my whole life. And that's that I'm not a radio guy. I'm not a radio guy that likes wrestling. I'm a wrestling guy that just happens to have been doing radio for a long time. And so for me, it was the next best thing. If I can't get you over in the ring, if I can't wrestle and do that sort of thing that way, I'm going to give you my darndest to give you a show on the mic, and at the same time make it you that they're keeping their eyes on. So,
well, you told us very briefly when we were talking before we started recording about when Bret Hart asked you to be the voice of Dungeon Wrestling and work with you guys. I mean, for a guy who grew up being a wrestling fan in Canada, there is nobody that compares to him. You know, all of us, even when it wasn't that it was scripted. I remember being a teenager going to a show, and that's the person that you still latched onto emotionally. So for that individual, to become your friend and your business partner, but to ask you to be the voice of the legacy of the Hart family, what was that moment like for you?
Geez, when you say it like that, I don't know. It just kind of made me realize what happened.
I'm getting goosebumps remembering having all my Bret Hart stuff, and I'm just like, if Bret Hart called me, like that would be mind blowing.
I'm just saying, I might have a doll of the boss right here, But it's amazing though, because it's funny, when this whole dungeon wrestling thing started, I was doing a national radio show, which the podcast is based on. That radio entity doesn't exist anymore, so that's how McGuire on Wrestling became what it is. But
and over 86 episodes, 30,000 plus downloads at least. So you're doing well on that show.
We're doing all right. Oh, there's the WCW. Actually, that one has a weird switch on the back too. If you flip it around, I think it makes his arms go up and down or something.
Yeah, something like that. I actually have a whole bag of them in my room. I was just cleaning out storage the other day, and I was like, "Oh, there's my Bret Hart stuff." So
I'll answer the Bret question in a second, but I do have to say this: I did once send him a picture of my Bret collection, and I was like, "We're still cool, right?" And it's like he was okay with it, so it's fine. But
where's your El Dandy action figure? That's the question.
What's that?
Where's your El Dandy action figure?
Hey, El Dandy's a hell of a wrestler.
Who are you to El Dandy?
Yeah. He's a bang-up guy. He's a serious professional. But when it comes down to that moment, like you said about Bret giving me the nod sort of thing, it all happened by accident. I was doing the show, driving across Canada. I had some personal stuff going on, and so I was driving across Canada in the US, and I was still covering shows, and I was literally doing the show on the road out of the back of a camper. So I turned this camper into a studio, a 3-mic studio with all lighting and everything else going on. It was great. So Bret and I were buddies, and I was like, "Hey, I'm going to show up at this show. Is that cool?" He's like, "Yeah." I talked to Dal. So I talked to Dal, and Dal's like, "Yeah, great." So here I am showing up at this outdoor show in Calgary with a camper and saying, "Let's do my radio show in this thing." And Bret and I, again, like you said, we'd worked before a few times, but even as I had Dallas and him sitting there talking about dungeon wrestling and what it was going to be, that was when the conversation kind of started, because they were trying to figure out, okay, we want to do this on some sort of broadcast medium. We want to stream this somehow. We're not sure how we want to do it yet, but we need a voice for it. And the microphones may have still been rolling when this entire conversation happened, and I might still have that audio, which, I don't know, maybe in my will, I'll make sure that it's played somewhere, because, but it's something I keep right here. You know what I mean? Because it's so special. But he said flat out, like, we want to take this thing places. We want to go big places, and we're going to need a voice for that. And he looks at Dal, and he looks at me, and he goes, "I think you could be the voice for it." And honestly, guys, wrestling announcing, wrestling commentary, wrestling play-by-play, I'd always been a ring announcer, and I take the ring announcing job very seriously too, which is something that I believe is an art in its own, if done right and done well. But then to be trusted as the guy to do the entire show was like, holy. So we did it. I did the first one solo, and then we brought a couple of guys in who are hilarious, because they're just a couple of business guys, but they're also friends of the family, and they're really diehard wrestling fans. And so now we're a 3-man team, which I love, because they're growing in this role. I kind of get to coach them as to, get in, get out, don't go too inside on it. Like, nothing worse than we were watching a hockey game sometimes, right? And you can have the little banter between the commentators, but ultimately you want them to tell you about the game. You don't want them going into a 5-minute conversation on their own, right? So not that our guys have ever done that, but now we're getting this flow, and you're getting this team that's worked together for a bunch of shows. So myself, Mitch Honsius, Dimitri Karolis, They're fantastic, and we have an absolute blast every time we do one of these shows. It is awe-inspiring, and we'll put our headsets down afterwards and just look at each other and be like, huh, that just happened, and that was just us doing it. So, I mean, to take you from the moment of Eep, where Brett's like, yeah, you should be the guy, to now we're feeling good about it. Now we're really proud of what's going on, and I get to help out with production stuff or offer. There might have been a time where I suggested something to one of the wrestlers, and Brett looked at me and said, I agree with Mike. And I was like, so, you have those moments where you're still going to be a little fanboy, right? But overall, it really is exciting. And it's something I don't take for granted either. It's what if I can't be in there wrestling, it's the next thing I'd want to be doing is this. So
just to wrap up with you then, A, I'm going to put you on the spot.
Mhm.
What's your favorite all-time Bret Hart match? B, what would you tell just to close things out? Somebody who's never watched Dungeon Wrestling before, why, if they're not in the Calgary area, they can't make it to the show, which is the best way to experience it, of course, if you can get there live and be there at the Victoria Pavilion on March 29th. But if they can't, what's your sales pitch for buying the pay-per-view on HNLive.ca?
Well, I'll tell you this right now. First of all, for people that have seen some of our matches on YouTube that go up every once in a while, like I help produce that as well. So I see the comments, I see the feedback from around the world. People are wanting to make the trip to Calgary from places like the UK, Australia. They're like, this is wrestling history. This is a wrestling mecca that you see these shows in. To answer your first question, which really isn't a put me on the spot match, my favorite match is Bret versus Owen, SummerSlam 94. An amazing steel cage match. Not a drop of blood flowed, but it was still one of the most brutal matches you'll ever see in your life. And it was the first time you saw the sharpshooter reversed ever. So that was kind of cool. But going back to our shows and why you should invest the time and invest a little bit of cash. And really, as far as deals go, guys, for live broadcast wrestling, I mean, it's a steal to get it on HN Live to begin with. If you can't make the show, watch this thing live, because not only are you seeing some of that ground and pound, gritty heart style Calgary wrestling that we've talked about. I mean, this is the stuff that Japan is still based on a lot today, that some of the best wrestlers in the world today. I mean, you've got guys in AEW, WWE, everywhere that still use this style of wrestling because it became so popular. But you're also getting the chance to support something. You're getting in on the grassroots of something. If there's one thing I've known about wrestling fans is that they always want to be a part of it. You want to feel like you belong. That's why you fly the company flag. That's why you fly your favorite wrestler's name or t-shirt or whatever, is that you want to be a part of something special. This is as legit as you can get when it comes to having a great time, watching some cool wrestling, and again, helping build something really special. This is, like you said, it's the next generation. It's the legacy of Hart family pro wrestling. I'm not saying this for my sake. I'm not even saying it for the wrestler's sake. I'm saying this for the fans' sake. We're just over really a year into this thing now. And to see the way things have grown and the interest and everything, it's because we're all working together as a team. Everybody believes in this thing behind the scenes. The family's behind it 100%. The fans are behind it 100%. And if you give it a chance, if you watch the show live, if you're able to join us, but if you can't, watch it here on HN Live. And I'll tell you right now, it's going to be one of the best things you watch, hands down.
Well, there you have it. You got called out, Dave. They're action figures, not dolls.
I found more of them.
Who is that there?
They're all Bret Hart.
Oh, of course.
So, yeah.
My sad Bret Hart tale, I was thinking about it as we were talking about how you can still get invested in Bret Hart emotionally, even when you knew wrestling was scripted, was I had tickets for the Monday Night Raw after Survivor Series 1997. And it was my first television wrestling show to attend live. I'd been to like house shows. So I was super excited. There was the whole storyline where, Bret Hart was the Canadian hero all summer long, leading into the big matchup with the hated Shawn Michaels. I was so pumped, took the bus by myself to go to the event. And then, of course, because he was betrayed the night before, no one from the Harts was there. So it was such a huge letdown of a show to be at. It was a real knife to the heart, so to speak. Then I have to say quickly, my favorite house show story was actually an Owen Hart story. It was shortly after the Survivor Series where Owen Hart started his turn against Bret. they got in a shoving match because Owen was the only one eliminated from their team. But Owen was still wrestling as a good guy. But I knew, because I saw that show, I knew what was happening there, that Owen was turning. So I think I was 13 or 12. So I was on the floor seats, and Owen was out there trying to be a good guy, and I was yelling at him for turning on the hearts. And so Owen found me in the audience, pointed at me, and held the ropes open and said, "Get in here, you little twerp." and
we gotta find that footage.
Yeah, what a personality he was. But we could have fun talking wrestling all day, and we're really excited to be a part of it and to have Dungeon Wrestling broadcasting on HNLive.ca coming up with unfinished business. Chris Masters against Steve Macklin for the Stu Hart Championship on March 29th. Time now for our plays of the week. Body slamming in to those from Adrenaline Source for Sports, Calgary's premier store for hockey, lacrosse, and team apparel. Recently renovated and bigger and better than ever. A one-stop shop for all your sporting goods needs. Visit us online at adrenalinegroup.ca. We fit your game. Dave?
Sherwood Park Knights got off to a hunka burning start in a game at number 1 of their playoffs, and Cohenhunka got a pair early against Fort Sask in an 8-1 contest, and they're a deep program. They're well coached, well oiled, experienced. I know that as 2-time defending league champions, they'd love to get back to the provincials and take one of those home. But in the meantime, long way to go. The opening couple goals there to get things started early for Sherwood Park over Fort Sask. Game 1. That was my play of the week.
My play of the week, it was what a first-round play-in series between the Cochrane Generals and High River Flyers. Chris Colwell had the call on HN Live. It came down to a Game 3 and overtime, and the winning goal scored for the High River Flyers from Ethan Bertson, sending High River on to the second round, where they have a lead on the league-leading Okotoks Bisons, hottest team in the league right now, and they won on HNLive.ca in overtime over Cochrane. That'll do it for us. Again, very excited to have Dungeon Wrestling Unfinished Business 2 on HNLive.ca March 29th. For Dave Dawson, I'm Shawn Mullin. Thanks for watching HN Live Today.